The sun over Varanine was pale and weak, barely giving enough warmth to touch the metal walls of the mining colony. The cold wind carried the dry dust of the planet across the settlement's narrow streets. Every building looked tired, worn down, by years without proper repairs. The people of Varanine moved slowly, their heads lowered, as if even looking up was too heavy a task. Varanine had once been a place of promise. The Sarati people came here to mine valuable minerals for trade. They had dreamed of wealth, a better life, and a chance to give their children a future among the stars. But that dream had broken the day the raiders came. The pirates had destroyed the long-range communication tower in their first attack, leaving the colony cut off from the rest of the galaxy. That was 3 standard cycles ago. Since then, no supply. Ships had arrived. No rescue forces, no messages. The colony had been forgotten, swallowed by the endless void of space. The streets were filled with quiet sounds, the creak of metal doors, the faint hum of power generators struggling to work, and the coughs of tired miners who no longer had the strength to dig. Food was running out. Medicines were almost gone. Even hope was fading. Elder Mrin stood in the central square, looking at the pale sky. His scales had lost their bright green shine, now dull with age and worry. Around him, a few Sarati gathered, their faces thin from hunger. "There will be no help," Maren said softly, his voice rough like stone. "We must accept this truth. No ship will come for us." No one argued. They had heard the same thought, whispered in their homes, in the mines, and in the dark corners of the settlement. Varanine was alone, but one young Sarati refused to accept it. Liren, a slim bright-eyed technician barely into her second decade, stood at the edge of the crowd. Her hands were stained with grease from the small workshop where she worked. She clenched her jaw, refusing to believe that their story had already ended. Late at night, while others slept, she worked in secret, hidden in the back room of the old power station. She had built a small transmitter from salvaged parts, pieces of broken mining equipment, old ship panels, and the few undamaged circuits she could find. The device was weak, far too small to reach the nearest star system. But Liren had learned how to make the signal bounce off asteroids and debris fields, hoping that somehow it might travel far enough to reach someone, anyone who could help. For weeks, she sent her signal, short, repeated bursts, encoded in the simplest language she could manage. Help. Varanine. Under attack. Out of supplies. Every night she sat in the cold workshop, watching the transmitter's lights blink as it sent its desperate call into the void. Every morning she heard nothing in return. Still, she kept sending it. One evening, the wind outside howled louder than usual, rattling the metal panels of the power station. Liren adjusted the transmitter's power settings, fighting the urge to give up. She was about to send the next burst when her console made a sound she had never heard before. Sharp beep that cut through the silence. Her heart raced. The small screen flickered, then showed a strange pattern of symbols she didn't recognize. It wasn't Sarati language. It wasn't from any neighboring species she knew. The pattern repeated, followed by a simple message translated automatically by her system. "Hold on, we're coming." Liren froze, her breath caught in her throat. Someone had answered. Someone had heard them. She read the words again and again, almost afraid they would vanish if she blinked too long. For the first time in years, a spark of hope lit inside her chest. But when she told the others, they only shook their heads. "A trick," Elder Marin said. "The pirates could be playing with you. Or at some distant signal. Not meant for us," another miner muttered. Liren's hands tightened into fists. "No, this was for us. They knew our name, Varanine. Someone's coming." Maren gave her a sad smile. "Child, even if they are, it could take cycles for them to arrive. We don't have that long." Liren said nothing more, but in her heart, she refused to let go of the message. She kept it saved on her console, playing it each night before she slept. The voice in her mind, calm, confident, became a lifeline. Outside, the sky stretched endlessly above the dusty ground, empty, as always. But now, when Liren looked at it, she didn't see nothingness. She saw a path, an invisible road through the stars where someone might be racing toward them, taught far away. Beyond the reach of their eyes, in the cold darkness between systems, something was moving. Engines burned hot against the void. Steel holes cut through the silence. A warship was on its way, but no one on Vera 9 knew it yet. The morning after the strange message, Liren woke before the first light touched the dusty streets of Vera 9. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard those words again come, certain, and unlike anything she had heard in years. Hold on. We're coming. She hurried to the power station, her breath visible in the cold air. The building was quiet, except for the faint hum of the old generator. She switched on her console, half afraid the message would be gone, erased by some glitch in her jury-rigged system. But there it was, stored in the memory, waiting for her. She pressed play. The symbols flashed across the screen again, followed by the translated words. Liren smiled, though it was small and cautious. She wanted to believe. She needed to believe. But the rest of the colony didn't share her hope. Later, in the mess hall, she tried telling others about the signal again. It's real, she insisted to a group of miners, warming their hands over a heater. They said they're coming. Someone is on their way to help us. An older miner named Cairn shook his head. And how far away are they? 1,000 light years. More. By the time they get here, there won't be anything left to save. They'll come fast, Liren argued. But she could feel her words slipping past them like wind through cracks. Elder Mrin joined the group, leaning heavily on his cane. Child, you have a good heart. But hope is a dangerous thing if it's false. I've seen too many cling to it until it broke them. Liren's gaze dropped to the metal floor. Maybe, but maybe it's the only thing keeping me from breaking already. That silenced them for a moment, but the doubt still hung heavy in the air. That night, she returned to the transmitter. The wind outside was strong, rattling the walls, but inside, the room was still. She sent another signal. Message received. Who are you? How long until you arrive? 4 hours. Nothing came back. She rested her head against the cold console, listening to the distant hum of the generator. Just when she was about to shut it down, her console chirped again. This time the message was longer. The translation was rough, but she understood enough. We are human. Ship name, ISS, Resolute, hold for rescue. Estimated arrival, less than 1 Vera cycle. Liren's heart pounded. Humans. She had heard stories of them in old trade tales, beings who lived on a lush blue world far beyond the Sarati territories. Some called them dangerous. Others called them unstoppable. But in every story, there was one thing humans never did: abandon those in need. She read the message again, her claws trembling. Less than 1 cycle. That meant within the next standard month, they could be here. In the days that followed, Liren kept the messages to herself. She still sent short replies, learning a little more each time. The human captain's name was Elias Ward. His words were brief, but carried a steady weight, as if every sentence was a promise. While the rest of the colony drifted deeper into hopelessness, Liren noticed herself moving with new energy. She repaired parts of the colony's defenses, checked the landing pads, and even fixed broken street lamps. Some whispered that she was wasting her time. Others simply ignored her, but a few noticed. The change? You're different, said Rina, a young miner, as they hauled water together from the storage tanks. Like you know something the rest of us don't. Liren hesitated, then met her eyes. Maybe I do. Just don't give up yet. 1 week later, the pirates returned. Their ships came in low over the horizon, black silhouettes against the pale sky. The settlement alarms wailed, and the streets filled with shouts as everyone scrambled for cover. Liren rushed to the power station and opened the communications channel. She sent a burst signal to the humans. Pirates, attacking. Please, hurry. From the window, she saw the raiders landing. They moved through the streets, taking food, stripping parts from machinery, and striking anyone who resisted. The Serati had no strength left to fight. Liren's claws dug into the console edge. She hated feeling so helpless. Hours later, the pirates left their ships heavy with stolen goods. The colony was quieter than ever. People avoided her gaze, as if her talk of rescue had only made the pain of the raid worse. That night, another message came. We received your distress. Stay alive. We are coming faster. Liren's throat tightened. She pictured the humans, somewhere far beyond the stars, changing course, pushing their engines to the limit. She imagined them in their warship, its steel hull cutting through the blackness, roaring toward Vera-9 for the first time. She allowed herself to fully believe. She stepped outside into the cold night. Above her, the sky stretched endlessly, full of distant lights. Somewhere out there, the Resolute was on its way. Somewhere out there, strangers who had never met her were risking everything to save her people. And for the first time in years, Liren whispered into the wind, "We are not alone." The days after the raid felt heavier than ever. The pirates had taken half the food stores, stripped parts from the colony's water processors, and damaged the main power grid. Lights in the settlement now flickered like dying stars, and the air carried the cold bite of machinery that couldn't run at full strength. Every step through the streets reminded Liren of what little they had left. Children sat on the ground, too tired to play. Miners returned from the tunnels with nearly empty carts, their tools dull and their shoulders slumped. Conversations were short, voices low, as if everyone feared that speaking too loudly might break what little peace remained. And yet, in Liren's chest, there was still that spark. The humans were coming. She had the messages to prove it, but belief was not easy to share. When she tried to talk about it, the elder simply shook his head. "Even if they are on their way, child, we are running out of time. Hope won't fill our bellies." "It might," Liren replied quietly, "if it keeps us moving." Nights were the hardest. Lying in her small metal-walled room, Liren could hear the wind scraping across the settlement and the occasional cough from the next unit over. Sleep often refused to come. She would get up, wrap herself in a worn blanket, and walk to the power station to check the console. One evening, as the weak red light of Vera's moon spilled through the window, she sent another short message. "We are holding on, but we are weaker each day." Minutes later, the reply came. "Understood. Trust us. We are moving as fast as possible." The words were plain, but Liren read them again and again, feeling their weight. There was something about the human way of speaking direct, steady, that made it sound less like a promise and more like a certainty. By the second week after the raid, trouble began to grow. The pirates, perhaps sensing the colony was nearing collapse, were spotted again, this time in the distance, skimming low along the horizon in small scouting craft. Liren saw them herself one morning while checking the east watchtower. Their black shapes moved like predators circling prey. She sent a warning message to the Resolute. The reply came quickly. "Stay hidden. Do not provoke them. We are close." Liren felt a flicker of relief, but she knew the colony couldn't hide forever. One afternoon, she found herself working beside Rina, repairing one of the broken street lamps. The wind carried the smell of rust from the old metal structures around them. "You really believe these humans will help?" Rina asked suddenly, tightening a bolt. "Yes," Liren answered without hesitation. Rina gave a half smile. "Then maybe I'll start believing too. Not because I think it's true, but because I'm tired of feeling like we've already lost." Liren looked at her friend, realizing that belief, shared or not, was already starting to spread. 3 nights later, she caught something unusual. It started as a faint blip on the long-range scanner. too far away to identify. At first she thought it might be another pirate vessel, but the reading was different, steady, powerful, and fast. She compared it with the data the humans had sent her earlier. It matched. Her heart leaped. She sent a message. "We see something. Is it you?" The reply came almost instantly. "Yes, that is us. Stay strong. We will arrive soon." Liren pressed her hands to her face, smiling despite the exhaustion that clung to her. She stepped outside, staring up at the pale stars. Somewhere, cutting through the darkness, the ISS Resolute was closing the distance. But the pirates were closing too. The very next day, alarms rang out. Scouts reported multiple ships approaching, larger than the usual raiding craft. They weren't attacking yet, but they were moving with purpose. The settlement braced for the worst. In the council chamber, voices rose in heated argument. "We can't fight them," one miner said. "We can't run either," another replied. "They'll take what's left of us." Liren stepped forward. "Then we hold out just a little longer. The humans will be here. I've seen their signal on the scanner." The elder looked at her with weary eyes. "And if they arrive too late?" Liren hesitated. "Then, at least we'll know we didn't give up before our chance came." That night, the settlement was quiet, but tension buzzed in the air like static. Liren stood on the edge of the colony, looking out into the open desert, where the horizon met the dark sky. Far beyond that horizon, engines burned unseen. She imagined the human warship, its hull gleaming against the void, pushing forward without rest. She imagined the crew she had never seen, preparing themselves to stand between her people and the pirates. The waiting was heavy, but for Liren, it was no longer an empty wait. It was a countdown. Somewhere out there, hope had taken the shape of steel and fire, and it was racing toward VEYRA-9*. The morning began like any other, cold air, pale light, and the sound of tired footsteps moving through Vera 9's dusty streets. But by midday, the sky itself began to change. At first, it was just a faint glimmer, like a star shining where no star should be. Liren noticed it while repairing a sensor panel near the colony's edge. She froze, her heart pounding. The glimmer grew brighter, pulsing slowly, almost like a heartbeat. "Rena," she called, pointing upward. "Look." Her friend squinted. "Against the light. It's moving." The two of them stood in silence as the object grew larger, sharper. The air around the colony seemed to hum with a strange, low vibration, so deep it could be felt in the bones. Other Serati began to notice, stepping out from their homes, shielding their eyes against the glare. Then it broke through the thin upper atmosphere. The ship was unlike anything the Serati had ever seen, vast, angular, and bristling with power. Its hull gleamed a deep silver, reflecting the weak sunlight like polished stone. Great engines flared behind it, sending ripples of heat across the sky. Symbols in bold, foreign letters ran along its side. ISS Resolute. The ship's descent was slow, deliberate, like a predator that knew it was already in control of the hunt. Gasps and murmurs spread through the crowd. Some Serati stepped back in fear. Others simply stared, awestruck. Liren couldn't move. Her claws gripped the edge of the sensor panel so tightly her knuckles hurt. They had come. Against all doubt, against the weight of hopeless days and nights, they had come. A voice crackled over the colony's old comm system. It was deep and steady, speaking in the human language. Then repeated in rough Serati translation. "This is Captain Elias Ward of the United Terran Fleet. People of Veraninu are no longer alone." The words rolled through the streets, carrying a warmth that seemed to push back the cold air itself. The Resolute hovered for a moment before smaller craft detached from its sides and descended toward the colony. The landing pads trembled as they touched down, and from them stepped figures taller and broader than most Serati humans, in dark armor, their faces partly covered by clear visors. Captain Ward was the first to remove his helmet. His hair was dark, streaked with silver, and his eyes were sharp but kind. He scanned the crowd before speaking again. "We received your signal. We came as fast as we could. You've endured more than anyone should have to, but that ends now." Liren felt her chest tighten at his words. Around her, Sarati began to exchange looks, some skeptical, some overwhelmed. One of the humans, a woman with short blonde hair, stepped forward holding a small device. "Medical scans first," she said gently, her words translated through a handheld unit. "We'll get food and supplies distributed immediately." The humans moved with quick precision, unloading crates of packaged meals, medical kits, and tools. Every motion spoke of discipline and focus, but there was no coldness in their manner. They smiled, nodded, and met the eyes of the Sarati as if greeting equals, not strangers. Liren watched as Rena accepted a packet of food from a human engineer. The engineer said something in their own language, then gestured toward the sky, where the Resolute hung like a guardian star. Even without understanding the words, Liren could tell it was a promise. When Captain Ward approached her, she stood straighter, trying not to seem too awed. "You're the one who sent the signal," he said, his translator repeating the words a moment later. "Yes," she answered softly. "I didn't think anyone would hear it." Ward's mouth curved into a faint smile. "We hear more than you'd think. And when we hear a call for help, we answer." As the humans worked, something remarkable happened. The tension in the air began to lift. The Sarati no longer huddled in corners. They stepped forward, speaking, asking questions, even offering to help unload supplies. Children peered curiously at the tall strangers, laughing when the humans bent down to greet them. It was as if the colony had been holding its breath for years, and now, finally, it could exhale. But the moment of peace didn't last long. Liren heard a sudden crackle over one of the humans' wrist communicators. The voice was urgent. Ward's expression shifted, his eyes narrowing slightly. He turned to her. "Your pirates are on the move again. Our scanners picked up multiple ships, headed this way." The words hit her like cold water. "They'll come here," she said. "They always do." Ward's voice was calm, unshaken. "Then we'll make sure this is the last time they try." That night, the Resolute stayed in low orbit, its shadow sweeping slowly over Vera 9 like a watchful giant. Human soldiers set up patrols, their equipment humming softly in the dark. Liren stood outside, staring at the warship against the stars, feeling something she hadn't in years, not just hope, but safety. Somewhere deep inside her, she knew the next days would be difficult. But now, there was a force standing between her. Morning on Vera 9 felt different now. The pale sunlight was still weak, the wind still carried the dry dust. But there was a new sound in the street's voices that spoke with energy, footsteps that moved with purpose. The humans had brought more than food and medicine. They had brought movement, structure, and something the Sarati had almost forgotten: confidence. Liren walked through the colony, watching small groups of humans and Sarati working side by side. A pair of human engineers were repairing the broken water processors with tools she had never seen before. Nearby, Sarati miners were unloading crates from a human shuttle, laughing awkwardly as the humans taught them how to lift heavier loads using powered gloves. Everywhere she looked, there was cooperation. Captain Ward had made it clear from the moment they arrived, his ship could fight the pirates alone. But the colony needed to learn how to protect itself for the future. Strength, he had said in the council meeting, isn't just in ships and weapons. It's in people who refuse to be easy prey. And so, the training began. Liren found herself assigned to work with Ava, a young human engineer with quick hands and an easy smile. Ava spoke slowly so the translation device could keep up. But her tone was always warm. "This," Ava said, holding up a small device, "is a portable shield generator. Not strong enough to block heavy weapons, but it can stop smaller blasts. Your people can use these when defending key points." Liren turned the device in her hands, amazed by its light weight. "We've never had anything like this," Ava grinned. "Then it's about time you did." Over the next days, Ava taught her more than just tools. She showed her how to reinforce weak structures, how to lay out supplies so they could be reached quickly in an emergency, and how to keep equipment working even with minimal resources. But what struck Liren most was Ava's attitude. Humans. Ava explained one evening while they worked on repairing a street lamp, "Don't walk away from people who need us. Even if the fight looks bad, even if we're outnumbered, we don't leave our friends behind." Liren tilted her head. "But we aren't your people. You didn't know us before this." Ava met her eyes. "That doesn't matter. Once you call for help and we answer, you're ours to protect. That's the human way." For the first time, Liren truly understood why Captain Ward's voice had sounded so certain in those first messages. It wasn't just a promise, it was a way of living. The training continued. Sarati volunteers learned to set up barricades and use shield generators. Human medics taught them how to treat injuries quickly during an attack. Even the children began to watch with bright eyes, some pretending to wear invisible armor and stand guard over the colony. One afternoon, Ward walked the perimeter with Myrn, pointing out where defenses could be strengthened. "You could have just taken us aboard your ship," Myrn said. "It would have been easier than teaching us to fight." Ward's expression was calm but firm. "Easier isn't always better. If we leave without helping you stand on your own, the pirates will be back the moment we're gone. You don't just need rescue, you need to be ready." Myrn studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps. We have more to learn from you than I thought." That evening, as the twin moons rose, the humans invited the Sarati to share a meal near the landing pads. Long tables were set with rations, fresh water, and even a few strange human fruits. Bright colors against the dusty backdrop of VEYRA-9. Laughter rose into the cool night air. Language barriers faded as people shared food and stories. Liren listened to Ava tell tales of earth-of green forests, deep oceans, and cities so tall they touched the clouds. She found herself smiling more than she had in years. For a moment, it was easy to forget the danger still lurking in the dark. But the reminder came quickly. Halfway through the meal, a sharp tone sounded from one of the human communicators. Ward answered, his voice low as he listened. When he returned, his expression was serious. "The pirate fleet is gathering," he announced. "We've counted at least a dozen ships. They'll be here within 2 days." A ripple of fear moved through the Sarati. Some froze, others whispered anxiously. Liren felt her chest tighten, but then she looked at Ava, who was already standing, calm and ready. Ward's voice cut through the tension. "You've been preparing for this, and we'll be right here with you. When they come, they won't find an easy target. They'll find Vera-9 strong, united, and defended." The humans stood like an unshakable wall, and slowly, the Sarati began to stand with them. That night, as Liren lay in her bed, she thought about Ava's words, the human way. It wasn't just about fighting. It was about standing together, refusing to let fear decide your fate. Outside, the Resolute floated like a steel star above the colony, its presence a silent promise. And in the distance, beyond the reach of their eyes, the pirates were coming. But this time, they would not find a colony ready to surrender. They would find a people who had learned the human way. The air over Vera-9 felt different. It carried a strange stillness, as if the entire planet was holding its breath. Every person in the colony knew why the pirate fleet was on its way. The day began with the Resolute sending a low hum through the atmosphere, its engines adjusting position in orbit. Human patrols moved quickly through the streets, checking barricades and reinforcing shield generators. Sarati volunteers worked beside them, passing supplies, tightening bolts, and learning the last steps of their new defenses. Liren stood near the east watchtower with Ava, checking the portable shield devices one by one. Her claws moved more confidently now, less hesitation, more skill. You're getting faster, Ava said with a smile. I had a good teacher, Liren replied, but the warmth of the moment didn't last long. Her eyes drifted to the horizon. Do you think they'll come in the daylight? Ava's smile faded. Pirates like to attack when they think people are at their weakest. But we're ready for them day or night. By midday, Captain Ward called the colony together in the central square. His tall figure stood on a raised platform, the translation device on his chest, projecting his words to the crowd. The pirates believe they can take what they want from you, he began, his voice steady and clear. They think Veronine is easy prey. They're wrong. Today, you are not alone. You have your own strength, and you have us. We will face them together. His words rippled through the Serati, straightening backs and lifting chins. For the first time, the colony didn't look like a group waiting to be rescued. They looked like a people ready to defend themselves. The preparations grew more intense as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Scouts stationed in the high ridges outside the settlement sent updates through the human comms system. Multiple ships. One report came through. Formation tight. Closing fast. Liren felt her heartbeat quicken. She remembered the last time the pirates came, how people hid, how supplies vanished, how the streets felt hollow afterward. But now, there was no running, no hiding. The humans had made sure of that. As night fell, the colony lights dimmed to preserve power for the shields. The pale moons cast long shadows across the barricades. Human soldiers took their positions on the high points, weapons ready, while Serati defenders stood beside them with improvised tools and shield generators. From her post on the watchtower, Liren could see the faint glow of engines far in the distance, cluster of lights growing brighter with every passing moment. They're coming, she whispered. Ava stepped up beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. Good. Let them come. Down below, Ward's voice came over the comms. All positions hold steady. Wait for my signal. The Resolute moved in the sky, its massive shape-shifting to face the incoming fleet. Liren couldn't hear it, but she could imagine the deep rumble of its engines, the hum of its weapons charging. The pirate ships broke through the upper atmosphere, dark shapes against the moonlight. They flew in tight formation, their hulls marked with jagged symbols. There were more of them than Liren had expected, easily, a dozen, maybe more. Fear prickled at the edges of her thoughts, but she pushed it down. Ava's words echoed in her mind. We don't leave our friends behind. The first pirate broadcast came through, their voice dripping with mockery. Veronine, we've come for the rest of what's ours. Step aside and maybe we'll leave you breathing. Ward's reply was calm, unshaken. This colony isn't yours, and it won't be yours. Leave now, or face the Resolute. There was a pause, followed by a laugh. One ship, against all of us. You must be desperate. Ward's voice hardened, not desperate, determined. The pirates didn't back down. Their ships began to fan out, preparing to surround the colony. Liren's claws dug into the railing of the watchtower as she watched them. Draw closer. Then Ward's command rang out. Shields up. Stand ready. The colony's defenses came to life. Blue barriers shimmered into place around key buildings. Portable shield generators hummed, forming protective domes over groups of defenders. The Resolute's hull glowed faintly as its own shields activated. For a long moment, everything was still. Liren felt every heartbeat, every breath. She looked at the Serati defenders on the ground, their eyes locked forward, and at the humans beside them, tall, steady, and unflinching. In that stillness, she realized something. It didn't matter how many ships the pirates had. It didn't matter how fierce they were. What mattered was that this time, the people of Veronine weren't standing alone. Far above, the lead pirate ship fired the first shot. The first pirate blast hit the colony's outer shield with a blinding flash, sending ripples of blue light across the barricades. The sound rolled through the streets like distant thunder. The Serati flinched, but they did not break formation. From Her post on the watchtower, Liren's claws gripped the railing so hard it hurt. Beside her, Ava adjusted her portable shield generator, its hum steady and strong. "Stay focused," Ava said calmly. "Shields are holding." Below, the humans moved like clockwork. They returned fire from mounted weapons, aiming with careful precision. Every shot from the Resolute above was like a hammer striking the sky, loud, powerful, and unmissable. Pirate ships staggered in their flight paths, some shields flickering under the human warship's relentless assault. The pirates answered with more firepower, circling low to target the colony directly. Bolts of energy streaked toward the barricades, only to flare uselessly against the shimmering blue shields. Ward's voice came through the comms, calm even in the chaos. "Hold positions. Make them waste their strength." Liren glanced down at the defenders in the streets. Serati miners who had once carried picks now stood holding makeshift weapons and shield devices. Human soldiers guided them, pointing out, firing angles, helping them aim. The line between the two peoples was gone. They were simply fighters now, standing together. A sudden explosion shook the east side of the colony, as a pirate craft broke through the lower atmosphere and skimmed dangerously close to the ground. "They're trying to breach from the east," Ava shouted, grabbing her rifle. Liren didn't think. She followed Ava down the tower stairs and into the streets, weaving between buildings toward the noise. The air smelled of ozone and burning metal. Ahead, a group of Serati defenders struggled to hold back advancing pirates who had landed from small dropships. Without hesitation, Ava raised her weapon and fired in short, controlled bursts. Liren darted forward to activate the shield generators, creating glowing barriers that forced the pirates into narrow lanes. The Serati took advantage, pushing them back toward their ships. The comms crackled again. "This is Ward pirates. Are pulling ships to the colony's south." All units converged there. The sky above roared as the Resolute descended lower, its massive cannons targeting the southern approach. Bolts of light tore through the air, striking the pirate vessels with devastating precision. Liren reached the southern barricade just as the next wave of pirates arrived. This time, the defenders were ready. Humans and Serati fired in unison, their shots coordinated, their movements smooth. Every time a shield flickered, someone was there to reinforce it. Every time a defender faltered, another stepped up beside them. The pirates, so used to terror and surrender, hesitated. Liren could see it in the way their formations wavered, in the frantic movements of their ships above. They had come expecting an easy prize. Instead, they had found a wall of resistance, one backed by the full fury of a human warship. Ward's voice came again, firm and final. All units pushed them back. The defenders surged forward. Humans used their powered gloves to shove barricades closer to the enemy, tightening the defensive ring. Serati, emboldened by the momentum, shouted war cries that echoed through the streets. Then came the sound that would stay with Liren forever. The Resolute unleashed its full broadside, multiple cannons firing in perfect sequence. The night sky lit up in white and gold, shadows stretching long across the ground. Pirate ships buckled under the force, shields collapsing one by one. Ava glanced at Liren with a grin. "That's the sound of them realizing they've lost." The retreat began quickly after that. The remaining pirate ships broke formation, scattering into the upper atmosphere. The Resolute pursued, just far enough to ensure they wouldn't regroup, then returned to its guard position above the colony. On the ground, the defenders stood panting, their weapons still in hand. No one moved for a long moment, as if afraid. The silence was a trick. Then the cheers began, first a few voices, then dozens, until the whole colony echoed with the sound. Serati embraced each other, and some even clasped human hands in thanks. Liren stood in the middle of it all, her heart racing. She looked at Ava, then up at the Resolute in the sky. The human warship had not just fought for them, it had fought with them. Captain Ward's voice came over the comms one last time that night. "Varanine is safe. You fought well. You stood your ground, and you won. Liren closed her eyes for a moment, letting the words sink in. The pirates would think twice before ever coming back, and even if they did, the colony now knew it could fight and win. The night ended with fires being put out, barricades being repaired, and defenders watching the horizon for any sign of return. But for the first time in years, those watchful eyes were not filled with fear. They were filled with pride. The morning after the battle, Veronine was quiet, but it was not the silence of fear. It was the calm that follows a storm. The streets still bore the marks of the fight. Barricades stood half broken, scorch marks lined the walls, and the scent of burned metal lingered in the air. But for the first time in years, the people of Veronine walked with their heads held high. Children followed the human soldiers through the streets, asking questions in curious tones. Serati miners stood in small groups, speaking not about shortages or raids, but about repairs and rebuilding. And above it all, the ISS Resolute hovered like a silver guardian, its massive shape catching the pale sunlight in the central square. Captain Elias Ward stood with elder men, reviewing the final security plans. "You have our protection now," Ward said firmly. "Veronine is under the shield of the United Terran Fleet. Any pirate who tries to return will answer to us." Maren nodded, his old eyes softer than they had been in years. "We will not forget what you've done here, Captain. You didn't just save us, you taught us how to save ourselves." Ward gave a small smile. "That's the idea. You don't need to be rescued twice." Nearby, Liren stood with Ava, helping to unload the last crates of supplies from the shuttles. The human engineer had shed her armor, wearing only the light utility uniform of her ship, and her laughter seemed to fill the air as she worked. "You know," Ava said, handing Liren a sealed case of medical equipment. "You're pretty good at this. You sure you want to stay here? The Resolute could use someone who knows how to build a transmitter out of scrap." Liren hesitated, looking out at the colony she had fought for. She saw familiar faces, friends, neighbors, people who had once moved like shadows but now stood with renewed strength. She felt pride at what they had become, but she also felt something else, a pull toward the stars, toward the ship that had come roaring from the void and changed everything that evening. As the sun dipped below the dusty horizon, the colony gathered for a farewell meal in honor of the Resolute's crew. Long tables were set up in the square, covered with a mix of human and Serati food. The air buzzed with laughter and the smell of cooking. Ward stood and raised a cup. "To Veronine, may your skies always be free, and your people always be strong." The crowd cheered, the sound carrying into the night. After the meal, Liren walked to the edge of the colony, where she could see the Resolute in orbit. Its lights blinked faintly against the blackness, like a star that refused to fade. Ava found her there, still thinking. She asked. "Yes," Liren admitted. "Part of me wants to stay, but another part." She trailed off, staring at the warship. "Another part wants to see what's out there. To go where help is needed like you did for us." Ava's smile was gentle. "Then maybe you already know your answer." The next morning, Liren stood with a small bag slung over her shoulder, at the base of a human shuttle. Elder Mren approached, his cane tapping softly against the metal ramp. "You've made your choice," he said. "Yes," Liren replied. "You taught me to care for my people. The humans taught me to fight for more than just survival. I want to be part of that." Mren placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then go with pride. And remember, Veronine will always be your home." The shuttle ride to the Resolute was short, but Liren spent every moment looking out the window. The colony grew smaller and smaller, until it was just a cluster of lights in the endless desert. And then, above it, the Resolute filled her view, powerful and alive with motion. When the shuttle docked, Ava led her into the bright, bustling corridors of the ship. Crew members moved with purpose, some nodding in welcome. Ward met them near the bridge. "I hear you're joining us," he said, his tone more like a statement than a question. Liren nodded. If you'll have me. Ord extended his hand, in the human way. Welcome aboard, Specialist Liren. Let's go see who else needs reminding that no one gets left behind. As the Resolute pulled away from Vera 9, Liren stood at a viewing port, watching her home fade into the distance. The ship's engines rumbled softly beneath her feet, a steady heartbeat that promised movement, purpose, and protection. Somewhere, out there, beyond the cold stretch of stars, another call for help was waiting, and this time, she would be there when the warship came roaring from the void.